Hey guys, my name is Matteo, and welcome to another episode of Sunday Mailbox. This is a video series where you, the viewer, can submit your gaming or Battlefield-related questions, and then I will give my humble opinion on them. To get the formalities out of the way real quick, if you would like to submit your own question that could be featured in an upcoming episode, you can do so by leaving a comment down below, or by sending me a Facebook and Twitter message. The first question for today comes from Austin, and it is, do you feel that TDM's spawn system is broken in Battlefield Hardline? It seems like enemies are constantly spawning behind you. I would agree with that assessment 100% because right now on TDM, you can spawn in and one valid tactic is basically to roam around where you spawned because action is constantly going to be around you. There's really no reason to head towards the center of the map. If I did venture away from my cubbyhole, I did venture away from where I spawned, usually someone would spawn directly behind me and I would be back at the spawn screen. That's really annoying and frustrating when that happens, and it seems to occur way too often in TDM. And so I think one of the largest contributing factors to this issue is that way too many servers are running 64-player TDM. TDM isn't meant for that many people running around. Like, you're never going to get away from that pure chaos. That's always going to be a problem with that many people on the map. But you still find this spawn issue with only 32 people or 32 players on Team Deathmatch. And so I think the real root of the issue is that for whatever reason, I'm not exactly sure why Visceral decided to go down this route, but it seems like the spawns are completely random. In Battlefield 4, the way that they approach their system is that one team is going to spawn on one side of the map, and then the other is, of course, going to spawn on the other. They may swatch sides every once in a while, like if you play on Dawnbreaker, for example, the spawns will switch, but usually you don't come into a situation where you're constantly spawning in the thick of combat or with enemies all around you. It does happen every once in a while. I'm not trying to paint a rosy picture of Battlefield 4's TDM because it does have its issues, but it's nowhere near as bad as it is right now in Battlefield Hardline. Honestly, I even have a little bit of a problem with the way that they approached it on other game modes like Conquest. It's nowhere near as bad as TDM, don't get me wrong, but if you are trying to defend an objective and you want to spawn in because the enemy team is trying to capture it from you, it will sometimes put you into the thick of combat, like directly on the capture point itself. You instantly die, that's never enjoyable, and so I would much rather it be where you spawn at the fringe of the objective. You have to make your way in so that while, yeah, you're not going to be instantly into the action, you're not going to be able to maybe defend it outright, but at least you're not going to die or have these situations where there's no time for you to react and the enemy has the advantage. I feel like that would just be a much better system. And so I'm going to go on a limb and say that Visceral is aware of these issues. I'm crossing my fingers that they are, and that hopefully in the near future they will be able to patch it and make some much needed adjustments to the way that the spawn system works in Battlefield Hardline. The next question comes from Garrett, and it is, what if the medbag could heal teammates but not yourself? This would encourage more teamwork while adding a significant downside to the medic class. Well, I'm assuming that this is in response to the fact that a lot of medics in the Battlefield franchise, doesn't matter what game you're playing, it can be Bad Company, Hardline, Battlefield 4, a lot of medics will go off and do their own thing because they can be self-sufficient. They get hit by a few bullets, they don't really have to worry about anyone giving them health, they can just plop down a med bag and be right back into the action. This is the reason why the medic class is incredibly popular in basically every Battlefield game that has released. Bad Company, they were using light machine guns, still incredibly powerful, and you look at competitive play, almost everyone was playing as the medic. You look at Battlefield 3, Battlefield 4, now into Battlefield Hardline, and while I guess you could make the argument that one of the reasons why is that they have access to the assault rifles, which are amazing, that's another reason, just compounds the issue that a lot of people play as this kit because they can go off and be Rambo and do their own thing. And so if we did decide to make this change where medics could no longer rely on their own med bag, well, the end result is that, yeah, you would have more teamwork. Medics would have to stick together. You would have to move around in a pack and you would have that nice teamwork dynamic, which is always important in the Battlefield franchise or in really any team-oriented game. That said, though, I don't necessarily know if this would be an appropriate change. You might be thinking, whoa, we want more teamwork. What the hell are you talking about? Yeah, that could be one outcome, but we also might run into some other issues. So the first thing that could happen is more teamwork. That's great. But the other worry that I have is that this may just simply require more people running around as the medic class. We might just see more medics on the battlefield because they want to have as many med bags as we possibly can. And so if we're playing on a large conquest map, you may just have medics running everywhere and no one to deal with the tanks. On the flip side, we may see no one run around as the medic class. Everyone is going to completely avoid playing as that kit because they're not able to regenerate their own health. They're going to be selfish and play as another class entirely because they were drawn to that benefit. And so I'd like to get your guys' take on this. Do you think that this would be a solid change? Do you think that this would push Battlefield in the right direction? Or do you like the way that things work right now? Let me know down below. The next question comes from Robert, and it is, what do you think of a pepper spray gadget being added into Battlefield Hardline? It would be great for dealing swift, realistic justice to the criminals. I don't know if you're serious or not, but I love this recommendation, not because I agree with it at all, but just how absurd this would be on the battlefield. So you're absolutely right. This would be realistic. A police officer, if they're going to use anything against you, they're gonna use a stun gun or a spray can way before they start using an M16A3 assault rifle. I know that in the news, especially in something like in Ferguson right now in the United States, there's a lot of concerns about how the police force is becoming more and more militarized, and that is an issue. But more often than not, if you see a police officer down the street and you're causing a ruckus, he's more likely to use pepper spray against you than a full-blown assault rifle. That being said, though, I can't imagine this being even remotely useful in Battlefield Hardline. At the end of the day, this is a first-person shooter. It is about the shooter mechanics. It's about killing your enemy. And so what would be its intended use on the battlefield? Would it be a non-lethal takedown? Could you pepper spray someone, they would become disoriented, and then you could just charge at the enemy while they're disoriented to go through a quick little takedown animation, much like the baton? Would it be like the stun gun, where if you're able to spray someone for like 2 seconds, then they're gonna drop to the ground in pain and agony, and that's a way to take them out of the battlefield? I mean, I guess that could be a way to go about it. But then the argument there is like, well, we already have the stun gun. Like, why would we need something else like that in the game? I'm not entirely sure if you were serious with this. When I read it initially, I took it as a joke, and I kind of selected this question because I thought it was hilarious. But if you were serious, let me know if this is actually something you would want to see in Hardline, because from my standpoint, it would be funny. It would be kind of a cool little Easter egg or just a funny thing to have in the game, but practically it would not be an effective gadget or weapon on the battlefield, and I can't really see this being something that Visceral would add into the game. Really funny suggestion, though. The next question is, what do you think about Visceral increasing the amount of kills from 500 to 1,250 in order to be able to unlock guns for the other factions? Well, personally, I like the fact that it's going to take a significant amount of time to unlock all of the weapons for each of the factions. It's gonna take a while before we start seeing criminals use the M16A3 or the cops using the M416, and I think that that's a good thing. Asymmetrical gameplay, for me, makes things interesting. It's not as crazy or outlandish as something like Evolve. It's not like that type of asymmetrical gameplay, but it does mix up the combat every single time that you jump into a server. What I liked about Battlefield 3 is that their starter weapons were faction specific. If you wanted to use the M16A3, you had to play as the US. If you wanted to use the AK, that was specific for the Russians. And while eventually you could unlock it for both factions, and that did happen, I just really like that concept the first time I jumped into Battlefield 3 when I first got the game. What I also like about it is it essentially forces you to try out different weapons. As soon as you switched on over to the other side, it's like, oh, well, I guess I'm not going to be using the M16A3. What's this gun? And then when you switch on over, you're like, oh, well, let's try out this one. Let's go try out this one. And I really like that dynamic because it just mixes up the combat, and really just right from the start, we're not seeing everyone run around with the same gun, and I think that is a good thing. In 6 months, yes, we're gonna have the situation where everyone has unlocked all of the assignments and people are all running around with, you know, the best weapon in the game, whatever that lands on. But at least for now, we can have this interesting asymmetrical gameplay, and for the most part, I think it is a good thing. But yeah, guys, that is about it for today's Sunday Mailbox. I hope you enjoyed. Once again, if you would like to submit your own question that could be featured in an upcoming episode, you can do so by leaving a comment down below or by sending me a Facebook and Twitter message. But until tomorrow, guys, have a good one and take it easy.